The next civil society representative.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity to speak on the topic of victim assistance and environmental remediation. My name is Alan Owen, and I am the son of James Ronald Owen, who served in Her Majesty's Royal Navy at Operation Dominic, a joint UK-US operation on Christmas Island in 1962. The first British test was carried out in 1952 at the Montebello Islands in Australia. The UK tested a total of 45 atmospheric weapons in Australia and the Pacific. They performed 600 minor or subcritical trials in Australia and 24 underground tests in the Nevada desert until 1991. A small delegation of UK servicemen also took part in Operation Dominic on Christmas Island, and one of them was my father. Over 22,000 servicemen took part in the British nuclear testing programme. Scientists, Indigenous people, and innocent victims were affected by this programme. At the second meeting of States Parties, we heard testimony from Karina Lester in reference to her father, Yami, and how after the totem test at Emu Field in 1953, a black mist moved across his territory, forever affecting those innocent people. Yet you may be amazed to know that the topic of British testing is not taught in schools in the UK. The participants and the victims have been airbrushed from history. This must change. There are generations of people who don't even know that the UK tested nuclear weapons, let alone the effects and the legacy. Speaking of that legacy, my father unfortunately died in 1994, aged just 52, from a heart attack. During his time on Christmas Island, he witnessed 24 detonations in 78 days, the largest being 7.7 megatons, because Operation Dominic was fast-tracked because of the Test Ban Treaty coming into force. My brother died in 1996, aged just 31, from the same heart condition, 18 months after my father. My sister also suffered a heart attack, but luckily survived. As the youngest of 3 siblings, I thought I had escaped the curse of the nuclear tests. But in April 2022, I suffered a cardiac arrest and was without a heartbeat for 8 minutes, clinically dead. Luckily for me, I had immediate CPR and 3 shocks from a defibrillator to bring me back to life. This is the legacy of nuclear testing. Congenital defects, neurological problems passed down through the generations. Mine is one story of hundreds of thousands of families worldwide who live with the effects every day. Yet the UK government refuses to study the descendants and voted against the new study into the effects of nuclear war. The TPNW with the victim assistance and environmental remediation is extremely important because of this legacy. The impacted communities need help. The Indigenous people have had their sacred lands forever contaminated. Burial pits in Australia containing plutonium with a half-life of 24,000 years. No-go areas with signs such as those at the Montebello Islands, which state to restrict your visit to 1 hour per day, avoid causing dust, as any particle might be radioactive, not to handle or remove objects as they may be radioactive, and no camping is allowed. This is 73 years later. We must continue to monitor these toxic environments and, as new technologies emerge, help the Indigenous people who live close to these areas. We have an opportunity to help the victims through the Trust Fund, but the fund must be administered with meticulous scrutiny. The actual victims receiving the help that they require. We must include the NGOs at the highest level of any board or grant-making committee. We are the experts in our own community. We have the lived experience of being part of the nuclear community. Whilst we might not be scientists, we understand our unique communities, their heritage, the suffering, and the pain. We live with that legacy every day. We now have 4th-generation descendants who are experiencing health issues, miscarriages, stillbirths, birth defects. The bloodline has been forever altered. It is critical that this fund is administered so that essential studies are completed, that programs that help the victims are created because they've been ignored for decades. Studies such as the DNA study from iglow.world, which seeks to capture the DNA of the first and second generation survivors before they pass away, so their whole genome can be sequenced for future studies. The average age of a UK nuclear test veteran is now 85, and many of them believe that the UK government is waiting for them all to die before acknowledging the harm. We estimate that there are between 1,500 and 2,000 of them left worldwide of the 22,000. So many have now passed away who campaigned for decades. Throughout my life, I have campaigned for recognition, for an apology, for compensation, and the abolishment of these weapons. This is why I founded LabRats, to help impacted communities, not just in the UK, but across the world. I've met some amazing people doing amazing things, like the people here today. Through the TPNW, we can make a difference. We can evoke change and help those affected. We can educate, raise awareness, tell our stories, and ensure that the victims receive the help that they deserve. But we must be included from the very beginning in the setup of the trust fund and the administration of the grants. We stand as one nuclear community, showing the world that these weapons are deadly, not just at the point of detonation, but for decades afterwards. The effects last for generations. We must never forget these participants, the innocent victims, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, many unknowingly. It is time the world woke up and started a new chapter in history. And that chapter is one without nuclear weapons, and one where the victims are assisted and where the world knows their story. As a representative for the British nuclear test veterans and their families, I encourage you to ensure that the role of the NGOs is not forgotten and that it is enhanced, and an impacted communities group created similar to the scientific advisory group. To the observers at this meeting, please double your efforts to sign this treaty. And to the state parties, thank you for your commitment to the treaty, and in doing so, you are protecting future generations from these terrible weapons of destruction. These should be abolished so that no one ever witnesses their destruction again, as my father did. Thank you.
I thank you.